Shame is an emotion, and you have to ask yourself whether it's justified or not. The function, evolutionarily, for shame is that it gets you to keep your mouth shut and hide your behavior so you don't get kicked out of the community.
This is LINEHAN. She's a behavioral psychologist and clinician, and she's also the creator of dialectical behavior therapy. DBT is the type of psychotherapy that helps people manage their emotions and improves their relationships. It was originally developed to treat borderline personality disorder. Thank you, Dr. LINEHAN. You are saving lives. In my last video, I talked about the stigma around these diagnoses and how it forces us to stay quiet and hide them, even from ourselves, due to shame. So yes, today's video is directly about shame.
Shame.
So in some cases, there are practical reasons to feel that you need to keep a secret. This was historically true for people needing to hide their sexuality in the US, and unfortunately still around pockets of the world today. Hide because your safety is at risk. She gives us more harrowing examples of justified shame.
A person who's molested a baby.
I like to emphasize the distinction between outright shame and justified practical shame. For example, you will absolutely lose your job and go to prison if you're a pedophile. Please don't touch children, but we can sure talk about you wanting to. I want to distinguish that those two things are very different, because in instances like these, people will and should be separated from society, even temporarily, at the very least, and even expelled. Think serial killers, pedophiles, rapists in prison, etc. There will be real consequences to their confessions, even their urges, and often these people do not confess unless already caught, and they're finally free and have nothing to lose. She also outlines the only ways to survive with shame that are justified, and I agree with them. One is to keep secret the shame for the reasons we mentioned earlier. Or you can find an environment where you're safe, a box outside of what you're in, a place where you can talk and dump that shame without the fear of rejection and actually have help examining it. If you're lucky, this could lead to feelings of guilt if you've done something badly and apologize. This would be the ideal outcome. But real fast, there's a big difference between guilt and shame. Narcissists don't feel guilt. They can only feel shame, and they feel it all the time for everything. Guilt is a private feeling, just you, the knowledge that you've done something wrong, that you violated your own moral codes and values. It means you have them and no one caught you, and that feels bad, privately, alone, no eyes, it just feels bad. Shame is more often dependent on cultural stereotypes and cultural demands, other eyes on you. You don't even really have moral values or codes. It's more performative for whoever's watching. You break it at any time you can and you feel no guilt. No bad feelings unless seen by someone else. It's not really real until then. And heck, even when you're caught, you're often playing dumb. And personally, these are my go-tos. I don't understand. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. I see. Oh, no, you got me wrong. That's not me. If you only understood. For an appeal to authority, LINEHAN puts this really well.
When it's not justified, the treatment is to do exactly the opposite of what your urge is. That means you have to talk about what you're ashamed about.
Popping a button on this for the purposes of this video. Guilt is something derived based on an internal code that you feel, versus shame being completely dependent on external validation. The goal for us, for me, but for anyone, is to feel guilt and not shame. You can only feel one when you wait it out and weeded through the other by talking honestly and vulnerably. This will be important for what's coming up next. So leading by example, commentators once asked, what are some of the things that I've done or do? So this video is going to suck for me, but here goes.
What are you up to again?
I am baking, basking, I think is the right word, in my shame while I write an incredibly, really awful thing about me, so.
Is it the Chipotle story?
I shall not speak of this after. Oh God, this is rough. Fuck.
Shame.
Right.
Seriously?
Shame.
Yeah, because I'm like, oh, this is bad.
Shame. Shame.
Just keep going.
Shame.
Your hands are shaking while you're
Shame.
writing
Shame. Shame. Shame.
So when I wrote this script, my hands were shaking, but I promised my friend who, if you think about AA, you know they have sponsors. Well, he's kind of my sponsor, at least is what I call him, of how to be a good human. And in a moment of fleeting confidence and boldness days earlier that I now regret, I promised that I would be talking about this and pull no punches, or else it doesn't count. It's kind of like a bet. So, story time. I call this the Chipotle story because it happened outside of a Chipotle and I'm not very creative. So anyways, my friend and I went to Chipotle and there was a homeless man sitting in front of the entrance, stopping people, asking them if they can get him some food. Everyone was avoiding him, and as we approached to go in, he stopped us too, and he locked eyes with the both of us. And before I can go on with the story, I have to tell you about my friend. He's probably, to the detriment of his own, the most kind and generous and patient person you'll ever meet, and it's so annoying. But he is my how to be a good person and real human sponsor. And that's my joke for him anyways, but I'm pretty sure he's an unwilling hostage on that journey. But back to the story. So I immediately wanted to join the group of people avoiding this homeless man's request for food and smile politely while we walked inside, saying, "Oh, no, I'm so sorry." But of course, my friend had to stop and he had to respond. And the rule is once you do that, you're pretty much fucked. So he had to honor his request. But oh my God, the cycle of different emotions that ran through me from that short walk from entering the door to getting into line, I felt incredible bouts of shame. Like the thoughts that ran through me was like, am I a piece of shit? Am I too greedy? And yes, I am too greedy. That is one of my defining traits. But I felt real anger at my friend. I turned around and I was like, you do know you're wasting your money, right, bro? This anger at my friend shifted to wanting to place blame on him for making me feel like I was a bad person. I was comparing myself to him. And while I was wrestling with these feelings, I came to realize how irrational the thinking was, because he said nothing of the sort. But it felt implied. And the next wave that came, and this one is going to be brutal for me, but if I'm preaching that shame is the root cause of all evil deeds, I'll need to go first and expose mine. So fuck it, I don't want to do this, but here we go. The next thought process that came into mind was, what if that homeless man outside was like a bit? Like the bits we see on social media. You know, some kind of test to plant, you know? I would have felt shame and regret for being exposed as a piece of shit. But worse, that I would have missed out on an opportunity to be rewarded for my goodness on camera. You get that, right? This had nothing to do with being a good person, only the appearance of it to the eyes watching. Sound familiar? Shame versus guilt. So here, to understand the steps of these thought processes and emotions better, we have to further examine the main driver of the cluster B of personality disorders and why it's so hard for us with these personality disorders or these diagnoses to get better. And that's due to an emotion called shame. Let's take a deeper dive into the two distinctions between shame and guilt. Both emotions are categorized under the self-conscious emotions umbrella, but we often mistake one for the other, which is bizarre because it's not even close. But both are emotions that monitor negative evaluations of the self. Guilt, however, is a self-correcting emotion that is able to monitor and evaluate one's negative behavior, which leads to feelings of guilt and remorse. The thing you did is real, it exists, even as it makes you feel bad. To you, whether or not anyone sees it or not. You can't repress it. Shame is a feeling that's accepted that one's entire self is bad or disgusting. And if this belief is accepted as truth from the individual, the smallest negative thought, feeling, or action that brings this truth to your consciousness will set off alarm bells in your psyche and cause circuits to overheat and shut down. The shutdown is employed by something called a defense mechanism. So you make the whole thing invisible, even to yourself, to see if you can get away with it to yourself and to anyone there. One of the main functions of the ego, which regulates the sense of self, is to create defense mechanisms, which are unconscious strategies to protect itself, to protect you from the bad feeling, bad to the point of unbearable feelings, the unacceptable ideas and attached feelings of anxiety, guilt, and other negative emotions, anything that brings your attention to negative self-reflection, because no human was built to be inherently bad. Shame prevents us from seeing the thought or behavior that makes us do or think the bad things. Because the feelings are basically smoke bombs and muddy the water. You can't see shit through that. So what happens if the ego is so fragile because it's protecting the general belief that one's self in their entirety is bad? You get personality disorders. This is why it's so important to talk about shame. The internal monitoring system inside individuals with personality disorders is definitely needing some tuning, more than the average person certainly. But it's a spectrum. There is no such thing as someone being all bad. Trust me, I'm on my own journey, but we've had a lifetime of not being able to understand, let alone regulate our overwhelming emotional state of being, which leads us to doing some really wild, self-destructive behaviors that is not only harmful to us, but for those around us. Jung had a quote that I keep close to my heart.
Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. and you will call it fate.
I don't know why I keep attracting these kinds of partners. Why does this always happen to me? There's always a reason, down to why we hum the songs we hum when we brush our teeth. If the answer is, I don't know, then it just might mean you don't like the answer. But there's always an answer for why we do the things that we do. We shouldn't keep these deeply fucked up thoughts or feelings to ourselves. It isolates us and makes us live in a forever state of resentment and anger, which is ironically what actually makes a monster. If I didn't tell my friend about these shameful thoughts and emotions, if I didn't speak out loud what I wrestled with and instead just buried it in my unconscious state, I would have left these emotions unresolved. And oh boy, if you haven't resolved these emotions, anyone near you should run. Unresolved here means that I gave my unconscious the go-ahead to build a defense, which would have led me to doing some fucked up things, like stirring a fight up with my friend in order to alleviate the psyche from the guilt I felt of being a bad person. I would need to fulfill my prophecy that I'm a piece of shit and disgusting, because I sure did feel gross about myself for having those thoughts and feelings. Self-judgment. So I would have unconsciously staged a fight to get yelled at in order to confirm what I believe deep down and get the punishment I deserve, and to have my friend hate me and to ultimately leave me. I would have acted in such a way to ensure that. This cycle would have been left unconscious to me so I can start the process again, instead of actually taking the hard steps to addressing the fundamental belief that I am, or that I feel that I am, a piece of shit, and taking those shovels to the face until they start stinging less and less. In later videos, I'll tell you what helped me feel guilt and feel a lot of feelings for the first time in my life that I thought I could never feel, and how I think nothing short of that will work for people, at least people like me, for people like me to feel anything again. Until then, I'll leave you with an article linking shame to anxiety in a meta-analysis, whereas if you are a keen-eyed viewer paying attention, and I know you are, you'll gather that the right amount of guilt will make that shit evaporate. In this article, Shame Proneness, Guilt Proneness, and Anxiety Symptoms, a meta-analysis, when controlling for shared variants of shame and guilt, in most cases shame remains significantly associated with anxiety symptoms. So if your internal monitor of shame is a general negative evaluation of the self, you'd be more dependent of external validation, of others' validation of you. Your entire sense of self, your survival, is now determined by others' perceptions of you. And hey, I'm serious, it isn't. And if it is a little right now, listen, it shouldn't be, at least. Because you start to need people to see you as you need to be seen. Perfect, good, smart, brave, holy, etc. If anyone sees anything else other than this, then you have a meltdown. The antidote to this is to feel bad more and to go bleed out shame. Go feel your private, quiet guilt. Apologize. Vow to mean it and never do it again. Keep an eye on the things that'll always sprout up to make that path hard, and know that you're not alone. I'm here doing it with you. And believe me when I say this sucks, it really sucks. It doesn't feel good, but getting better feels a lot like you're getting worse. Hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next one.